We've got it. Folks, if I could have your attention, I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting to order this morning. I'm Kevin Jeffries, Chairman. We've got about 3 docketed items here this morning, and before we get started, would you all join me for Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Before we get started, if you have a cell phone with you, please either turn it off or turn it on vibrate so that it doesn't ring and interfere with the cameras in the courtroom here. We will go ahead and commissioners, look at our approval of our minutes first, as always, from our May 22nd meeting. Are there any additions or corrections that need to be made to the minutes? Ms. Bonet.
Question, on page 4, a little more than halfway down, it says display letter from engineer, in parentheses, actually a surveyor. For clarification, is that also a surveyor, or are they saying he wasn't an engineer?
Well, they presented evidence and said their engineer prepared it, but it was stamped by a surveyor.
Okay.
So there was discussion that day about their professional staff that they had and the applicants had, and so that was just a point of clarification.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other additions or corrections? Okay, seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Mr. Hampton moves that we approve the minutes as mailed. Do we have a second? Second. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we can do this by voice vote. All those approving the minutes as mailed from our May 22nd meeting signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Okay, minutes from May 22nd have been approved. And just a couple of announcements before we get started, before we swear our folks in this morning. Brooke would like to welcome you back. She's been off on maternity leave for a little while, and glad to have you back. And we have a new lady that's going to be helping us out today, Shelley Nunn. And so she's getting trained today, and so welcome aboard. Thank you. So,
Actually, she's going to be helping us out for quite some time because we hired her as a front desk person. So, not just today.
She will be your future clerk.
All right, great. All right, with that, before we get started with our first docketed item, let's get the staff sworn in, please.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. With that, before we actually do the first docketed item, we need to get that removed from the table. We had tabled this at the March 27th and the April 24th meeting, so if we could get a motion to place it back on the table for discussion, that would be
Motion
appropriate.
made.
Okay, Mr. McWilliams.
Mr.
And
Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Are you ready for that motion?
Sure, go ahead.
Move to remove the item from the table and back for discussion.
Okay, and Mr. Horton, you second?
Second.
Okay, it's non-debatable and non-amendable and comes to immediate vote. We'll just do this by voice vote. All those in favor of placing docket PZ 18003 back on the table for discussion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. All right, docket PZ 18003 is back on the table for discussion. And with that, Brooke, I'll call on you to read the first docketed item.
Yes, sir. Docket PZ 18003, an application has been filed by Great House Incorporated for a waiver to allow a residential use in a commercially zoned property for a tract located at 6323 Highway 329 in Crestwood. The zoning is C1 local business. And as Mr. Chairman stated, that it was tabled from March 27th, April 24th, and May 22nd.
All right, with that, now, as far as introduction of the application, Ms. Alvey.
Hang on, Amy. Mr. Chairman, please, if I may. The last time we had this on the table, discussion went that my father owns property adjacent to this parcel. I do not have a financial interest in either his business as real estate, and I don't believe I have a conflict with respect to this particular application, but I wanted to make that disclosure before we moved on and see if the commission perceived a conflict in that respect.
Any commissioners have any issues with him serving?
No, I'd like to make the motion for the record that Mr. King stay with this commission and this particular agenda.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, multiple seconds. Any discussion? Allow Mr. King to serve on this, for this particular docket? All right, all those in favor of allowing that to happen signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. Okay, thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
All right, Ms.
Mr.
Alvey.
Chairman.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me. Same line.
Okay.
McWilliams Real Estate Auction and Appraisal owns the property immediately across the street from this property. Have no vested interest in the property, one way or the other. May have a question or two, but I will disclose that to the commission.
All right. There again, commission have any trouble with Mr. McWilliams serving?
Seeing no one raising their hand, well, maybe one down there. I'd like to make a motion that Mr. McWilliams continue with this
A little nervous
particular
there for a minute.
agenda. I do know both of them and have complete trust in their honesty.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay, I have a second, Mr. Falvey. All right, any discussion on allowing Mr. McWilliams to serve on this document? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of allowing Mr. McWilliams to serve on this particular docket signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. All right, anyone else before we move on? Uh-oh.
I got it.
That took too long.
Yeah, exactly. All right, with that, Miss Alvey, I think we're finally to the point you can introduce the docket.
All right. Good morning. Amy Alvey with Oldham County Planning Development Services. As Ms. Beeman just stated, this is an application requesting a waiver of Section 160-020 permitted uses in the C2 community business of Oldham County Zoning District. I'm sorry, it should be C1, sorry. The property is located at 6323 Highway 329 in Crestwood. This is the aerial of the existing property here. This is the property that Mr. King was just speaking of in relationship to it. This is an area view that just shows the overlay of the structures. The property is outlined in red, and then the hashed area is drives. On December 15th of 2008, the Oldham County Planning Commission approved a development plan, PZ-08-027, and recommended approval of a zoning map amendment from R2 residential to C1 business district to the city of Crestwood. And on March 11th of 2009, the city of Crestwood approved the zoning map amendment. That was Ordinance 2, Series 2009. So originally the property was owned R2, and it was changed in 2008-2009 to C1. In 2009, the property was rezoned from R2 to C1, local business district, to be used as an office. The applicant is proposing a mixed use in the building of residential living space and commercial space. The building is approximately 1,200 square feet, and the applicant would like to have a residential lease for the second floor that would be for the building manager / supervisor. For the first floor, commercial tenant. Section 150-020C1, local business district, permitted uses does not list residential as a permitted use. Therefore, the applicant is asking for a waiver of that regulation. The structure is currently being remodeled and has been used as residential property prior to the applicant's ownership. The property shares a driveway off of Highway 329 with the property to the west, which is also owned by the applicant. So this is the current zoning map. Again, the subject property is highlighted there, or outlined in red. This is the picture of the property that was currently under construction. This is the rear of the property. This is just another rear yard picture that shows, it's hard to tell in the picture, but those are homes that are backed up to it there. This is the north view on highway, it should be 329, not highway 393. This is the north adjoining property. This is the west adjoining property. This is just a zoomed out version of the west adjoining properties to show both. This is adjoining to the south. This is 329 going into Crestwood. And again, this is just the adjoining property to the south. So in summary, the applicant is requesting a residential use waiver for mixed use because section 150.020 C1 local business district permitted uses does not list residential as a permitted use. That is all that I have.
All right, Ms. Alvey, before we open it up for questions from the commission, I need to ask, is the applicant here?
Yes,
Okay, all
with
right.
their attorney.
Oh, okay, all right, great. Yeah, if y'all would come down a little bit closer, just wanted to make sure. All right, with that, we'll open it up now for questions from the commission to the staff. Is there any questions that you have? Yes, sir, Mr. Horton.
Yes, this is sort of a procedural question. Zoning goes with the land, correct?
Correct.
Do waivers go with the land, go
Yes.
with the property owner, or go with whatever?
They
So they are,
run with the land.
they are like a zoning change, goes with the land?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and let me just, ask our attorney to, if you concur with that, sir. Yes. Okay. All right, any other questions for staff? Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll now move into the presentation by the applicant or representative and others in support of the application. And you have 50 minutes. If we could, I assume you're an attorney?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll get, won't need to swear you in, but we'd like to get the applicant sworn in.
Sure.
First, if we could here. And, Ms. Beeman?
Please raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
Brent Jones, 6323 Highway 329, Crestwood.
All right, and if you would introduce yourself?
My name is Trenton Burns.
Burns?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Trent, you all have 50 minutes to make your presentation on the application here.
Okay. I don't think I'm going to need 50 minutes.
Okay?
This is Mr. Jones. He is owner of Great House, Inc. They own, like Miss Alvey said, the property at 6323 Highway 329, as well as the property 6325. He's in the process of remodeling both of those buildings right now. Both of those buildings are zoned commercial. I know 6323 is C1, is
I think it's actually C2.
C2 is the second property.
On the second property,
Okay.
I believe.
He's looking, he's not seeking a zoning change. He's seeking a waiver for mixed use of the property, as Ms. Alvey said. As he was remodeling this home, or this building, I guess, former residential home, he saw the potential to have an apartment as part of this building. By nature of his business, Great House is in the business of remodeling homes, building homes. By nature of his business, he doesn't need necessarily a lot of office space. He doesn't really have a lot of visitors coming and going at the office necessarily. So he thought maybe I could have this as sort of an efficiency type apartment. I know one of the ideas Mr. Jones had was, you know, he's in the business of building homes for people. Maybe while the homes are being built, you know, they can have a place to stay, and kind of like a short-term rental arrangement. I know technically the definition for a short-term, I don't mean that literally, because I know short-term is less than 30 days for a rental, but I mean just a, you know, a month-to-month type maybe arrangement while the house is being built. He also talked about maybe potentially your niece
Right.
living there. It's a good property. It's a nice building, and he's, you know, in the process of remodeling it. But before he, you know, he's kind of cleaned it out. But before he starts making some decisions about what, you know, he wants his office space there. But he wanted to pursue this to see if, you know, before he gets too far in, if he could have, you know, some, you know, there's some opportunity in this building. So as far as, you know, its impact on the area, it really won't have any substantial change. It's not really going to increase traffic. It doesn't conflict with the comprehensive plan. I mean, there's commercial properties adjacent to this one. There's also residential properties that are very close to this one as well. I think Mr. Jones has demonstrated that he's dedicated to, to be quite frank with you, sprucing up this stretch of Highway 329. This couple of properties here have really not offered much of anything for, a number of years now. So I think it's good what he's trying to do, and I think it'll be good for the area. Also, another thing too is in the process of remodeling some of these homes, to stay consistent with the conditions of the prior zoning change. You can't store things outside and stuff like that. So he's used that 6325 building as kind of like a storage building of sorts right now. And he's had some issues with theft and vandalism on that property while he's in the process of trying to remodel it. So, potentially, remodeling 6323, having it as an office set up and having somebody there the entire time could help kind of watch over that property, especially if it's somebody like his niece who's familiar with him and familiar with what he's got going on. So you want to present you want to show them the plans? Or?
Would y'all like to see the plans?
Sure.
Okay. I'll let Mr. Jones take over.
Should I walk up to you, or?
Put it on this screen
Okay.
here.
It might be a little bit big for the overhead projector, but this is the proposed second floor of this property. And let's see if I can get it to where. So the second floor, this is the second floor of this property that we're planning on renovating. I've already actually acquired the building permit for that. So whether I actually get this approved today or not, we will move forward with finishing out the second floor as another commercial office. And that's already been permitted, and the permitting has been approved. So I have an outside entrance here with a flight of steps coming up this direction into the second floor. And in the second floor, I'm proposing an efficiency, a kitchen, bathroom. I'm sorry, that's the main floor. I'll show you this first. Let's see if I can get that. That's a rear view with the flight of steps going up to the second floor door that goes into the second floor. And to do that is a simple bump out of the roof line. Here, it's just a simple bump out of the rear roof line. It's not seen by the front, just a little bit from both sides. And it's architecturally correct with the house as far as the roof pitches. And then this is the layout of the second floor. So you come in here, efficiency of kitchen, bathroom, and then this is the proposed living space. Whether it's I'd like to use it for residential purposes, but if not, I'll just use it as commercial, another office. But I would like to get this second floor. That's my proposal, is to have it approved for an efficiency apartment.
Oh, okay. Does
That's
that
it.
complete your
Yes.
application?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. With that, let me ask, is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of this application? Anyone here to speak in support of? Okay. Seeing none, we'll now move into the testimony and questions by those opposing the application. Is there anyone here that is opposed this particular application? Right. Seeing none, we'll now move into, let's see, questioning of the applicant and well, there's nobody opposing, so by the commissioners. Mr. McWilliams.
Yes, sir. Mr. Jones, please. I'm your neighbor across the street.
Yes. I don't think I've ever met you, but I have now.
Approximately how many square feet will be at the second story when that's completed?
The second story has approximately, I'm just guessing, between 600 and 700 square feet in it.
Okay.
And the first floor already has 1,200 square feet.
Now, the bumping out of the roof, I'm assuming that's for headroom?
Well, it's to get the outside entrance.
Okay.
It's, on that rear side.
Okay.
It's also to get the headroom in that rear side, but there's a sufficient headroom on this, in rest of that second floor.
Okay.
Yeah, because I could take those walls down to a 5-foot wall and count it as square footage.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Horton.
Thank you. I've driven by that location a lot of times, and I've never seen anything in that second floor. What has or hasn't been in there, and for how long?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
The second floor is, I think you said one time there was someone that had lived there?
Not
or-
in the second floor. The second floor was just an attic space. It's a ranch, but it's got high-pitched ceilings in it. And when we started renovating, we realized there's a lot of space up in that attic, and it was easily converted to, it's space that's easily converted into living space.
So, okay, so there wasn't anyone living up in that,
Not in the second floor. It was strictly attic space.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There are windows in that second floor, or this second floor area?
There's not windows yet, but there's going to be, the bump out in the rear gives it the windows and the egress needed,
Okay.
which has already been approved by Mark Tice.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant? Yes, Ms. Bonet.
On our staff report, it says that it was being used as residential prior to your ownership. When did you purchase the property?
Purchased it, I think, in '08, and
Okay.
it was a residential property.
Okay, so you're the one that applied to have it changed to
Yes,
commercial?
yes.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Finney.
Yes, Mr. Jones. In your application, you state that this is requested for at least initially for a building manager
Yes.
and for the commercial tenants, and you have tenants as plural. First of all, what would you define at least initially? And then second, is by tenants being plural, are we talking,
Well, the tenants is the mixed use. It's the commercial tenants and the residential tenant that would be leasing that second floor apartment. And one of the reasons I would like to have someone leasing that, two is an income stream, obviously, and second is to watch over the properties when there's no one there on weekends and in the evenings, because I have actually had problems with theft in my adjacent property. So it would be nice to have someone there permanently just to oversee, just to be there in those properties.
all right, also, you have an exceptional hardship explanation in here because of unique topographical, other man-made physical conditions encountered on the land. Could you define what you mean by that a little more clearly?
I can clarify that.
Okay.
I mean, the land itself, it's not an overly huge property. And I mean, if he wanted to have some sort of residential use out of the property, it would probably come in the form of some sort of accessory structure. And I just don't think that there's enough room on that property to have any type of accessory structure that would be, sufficient to be residential. So I think this is, as far as using the property and the building that's already existing on the property, I think this is the best use to get the mixed use that he wants out of the property.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Mr. Horton.
Yeah, you bought it in 2008, I think, or something like that, you said? And you changed it to the commercial?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
What's changed in that area and to have you think now that it's appropriate to have a waiver
Well, what
for
what
residents?
changed was, as I currently renovating, I bought the house in 2008, and then the recession hit, and I just let those properties sit, just couldn't afford to renovate them. But now that I am actively renovating that building, as I was renovating, I discovered all of the empty space in that attic space. And I was thinking that would make a great use for, actually, I started off as great office space. So I started renovating it as office, and then I got to thinking, well, maybe I could use it as an office manager, sublet it, maybe lease it out, and I wanted to get y'all's approval to be able to do that as an option.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, we'll move in now to, I guess, rebuttal, or anything that you want to add or address that hasn't been addressed in the questioning time, Mr. Burns?
I think so, sir. I think we're good.
All right. All right, now we're down to final statement. Do you all have a final statement you'd like to make to the commission?
I just reiterate what I said before. Like Mr. Jones was saying, these properties have been sitting for a while. I think he's got a really good plan with what he wants to do, kind of with not only this property that we're talking about, but the adjacent property. Like I said, the stretch of road really, other than Mr. McWilliams and Mr. King, there's really not a lot going on. I think it would enhance the area. It would help him kind of get the ball moving on to have an income stream like that. So I just think it's good for the area, and I can't see where it can conflict with the comprehensive plan, because, like I said, there's really no substantial change in what you've already got, other than it's going to be revitalized after remodel. So that's all we have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That completes your application then. All right. With that, docket PZ 18003 is concluded, and I will, as always, ask Mr. Urban to outline what's being requested here.
Again, to reiterate, they're asking for a waiver of the requirement to allow a residential use of a commercial property. And from hearing the testimony, the only two proposed conditions that you might consider is that the waiver only apply to the plan reviewed at the meeting today. And then the second thing is, I heard them testify, actually, that they would not have any outside storage.
Okay. Mr. Carter, anything you need to add? No. Okay. All right, Commissioners, you've heard what's being requested here on this request for a waiver, and you heard Mr. Urban outline what he recommends as far as maybe some additions to add to that waiver request. What's the Commission's thoughts? Do we have a motion on the waiver? Mr. Falvey?
Yes, I'll make the motion for approval of the waivers. They seem to be in strict compliance with the regulations and would create an undue hardship because of the unique topographic or natural or man-made physical conditions of the property, and I might add the surrounding areas. The design innovations of this case will achieve the basic objectives of the regulations.
Okay. And,
I would add the two conditions
okay. All right.
that were noted earlier.
All right. You've heard the motion. Do we have a second? Okay, multiple seconds. Looks like Ms. Bonet. With that, we'll open it up now for discussion. Any discussion on the motion to approve the waiver request? Mr. Finney.
I just have a question on, we've got an area zone commercial. Are we setting a precedent for other applications for the same thing in the same area, and then thus changing the type of business that goes on in that area?
My opinion is this. First of all, I don't think, we use this word precedent occasionally, and each case is different. So, yes, it could affect something down the road, but really, every case you hear has its own unique conditions. So precedent is only used to kind of think, well, we did this over here, what about here? You can address each one separately. The real point I want to make is that originally in our regulations, as you've heard in the past, we had tiered zoning. So it said that if you had commercial zoning, you could do everything in the commercial, residential. And so this was an allowable use under the old regulations. In '07, when the zoning ordinance was rewritten, or somewhere thereabouts, we went away from tiered zoning and said, okay, if you're commercial, this is all you have. So really, again, in the past, this would have been allowed in our regulations. So had he bought the property in '05, before the regulations were changed, he could have put in this residential unit, and it would have been, a legal non-conforming use. So occasionally we hear these where we talk about this change from the tiered zoning to strict zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McWilliams, did you have something?
Yes, sir, I did. I just encourage the commission to support Mr. Falvey's motion. I don't think the downzoning is an issue, because we've had that forever and ever in other circumstances. But I think it's just a great improvement, not only to this particular piece of property, but to the area in general. The corridor that runs from up next to the hamburger place, Dairy Queen, all the way down, past Potts Lane, has indeed gone from residential to commercial over the years. But these two pieces of property, they were just rough looking. And the improvements that he wants to make are going to help the property and help the corridor. So I encourage the commission to support the waiver.
All right. Mr. Horton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got some problems with this. He's already mentioned, the applicant has already mentioned that he can continue his business as it is, and he already has the permit for it, so it's not a hardship for him. It's sort of it's not a hardship for him, actually. It's a convenience for him. I like the idea of him using it commercially up there. I have some concern with the waiver going with the land. In the future, who knows what they will do with the second story or the whole building, as far as that's concerned. It's not a permitted use in C1, so it's already mentioned a not permitted use. Of course, the waiver would eliminate that. And it'll be the only one in that area, surrounded on three sides by C2 and C3. It talks to me about the detriment to the neighborhood. There is no neighborhood immediately around this. It's commercial on three sides. So I can't see how it'd be a terrible hardship, since he's already prepared to go with what he has and use it commercially. Just my comments.
Okay. Ms. Bonet. Oh, Jim, or Mr. Urban, you have something to-
Can I clarify that? I heard him say that he has a permit, but he said he has a permit to make it commercial. His plans that were drawn up allow, with the extension of the roof line, for windows. I think I heard him say that if we didn't grant this, that he would, the building permit is not premature, in my opinion, that it's been reviewed to be used potentially as a commercial space or as residential, whichever we decide. So
Yeah, I didn't mean to think that it was improper or that it was premature. I just meant that he'd already had considered it, that he could use it as commercial, and he has an alternate plan to
Yes,
use
sure.
it commercially. So I don't see it as a major hardship. I see making it an apartment just simply a convenience, and it's going to be an isolated piece of property as a residence surrounded by commercial on three sides.
These were originally residential properties, and then, like Mr. McWilliams said, it got converted over time and reused and revitalized. And just as a comparison, we have commercially zoned property and other locations where you could live above, as in Main Street and LaGrange. So it's fairly common to have a mixed use. If you have heartburn over it, that's another issue, but it's not out of line to ask.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Bonet.
Along with what Mr. Urban was saying, and maybe to make Mr. Horton feel a little better, to approve a waiver, we don't have to prove that there is a unique hardship. We can utilize the design innovations in the case and believe that it will achieve the basic objectives of the regulations, which I feel this does. There is residential directly behind this building. The permits have been approved. The construction being done is an improvement to what's already on that property. It's a single apartment. It's not like they could make it into an apartment complex in the future. It's going to improve the area. And mixed use, I think, is considered very innovative, very popular nowadays, partially for security. It's something that is, I think, is a trend that is growing, and so I support the approval.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to approve the waiver request? All right, they're all ready to vote. Okay, and this is a motion to approve the requested waiver on docket PZ 18003. And this is a motion to approve, and I'll call on Ms. Veman, if you would, to take the vote, please.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. McWilliams?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Mr. Finney?
Yes.
Mr. Klingenfuss?
Yes.
Mr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Halfling?
Yes.
Mr. Hampton?
Yes.
Ms. Bonet?
Yes.
Mr. Mesker?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
No.
Right, the motion to approve a waiver to allow residential use in a commercially zoned district for a tract located at 6323 Highway 329 has been approved on a vote of 12-1. And with that, we'll take a 10-minute recess to set up for our next two docketed items, and I would just caution the folks that are here to please don't talk to the commissioners or whatever before, we get started with our next docketed item. So we'll come back here in 10 minutes for the next docket. Thank you.
from here. Right. I'm not kidding you. It has been, he's the last person and I'm getting ready.
Folks, let's come back together for our next two docketed items, please. And if you would, I just remind you, if there's some new folks that have joined us, please turn your cell phones off or on vibrate so they don't interfere here with the cameras here in the courtroom. And with that, we will now call on Ms. Feeman to introduce the next two dockets, please.
Docket PZ 18010, application has been filed by Stephen Edwards for the approval of a zoning map amendment on approximately 14 acres. The property is located at the 7300 block of Highway 329, Crestwood. The change is from R2 Residential District to R4 Residential District. Docket PZ 18011, application has been filed by Stephen Edwards for the approval of a development plan on approximately 14 acres. The property is located at the 7300 block of Highway 329 in Crestwood. The proposed zoning is R4 Residential.
All right. With that, Ms. Alvey, I understand you're going to introduce this docket also.
I will. Good morning again. Amy Alvey with Oldham County Planning and Development. As Ms. Feeman said, this is an application requesting approval of a zoning map amendment from R2 residential to R4 residential, as well as approval of a preliminary plan including 216 apartment units on 14 acres. This is an aerial view of the site outlined in red. You can see it runs parallel portion of it with I-71. This is the current zoning. Everything highlighted here in yellow is R2. The area here in red is C4 commercial. This is the future land use map. Again, the area here is in red, shows as commercial, and then the area towards the rear shows agricultural rural. There has been no previous site history regarding this particular piece of property. Case history, the neighborhood meeting, which is a requirement under our zoning ordinance, the applicant held that meeting on April 30th of 2018. We had a technical review committee meeting on May 16th of 2018. Joining property owners were mailed out for this planning commission hearing on June 6th. The sign was properly posted on the property on June 12th, and the public notice appeared in the Oldham Era for this hearing on June 14th, and these meet the public notice requirements compiled from KRS 100 in Chapter 424. The applicant is requesting approval again of a zoning map amendment from R2 to R4 and a preliminary plan for 216 apartment units on 14 acres. This is an overview, or an overlay, I'm sorry, of the proposed plan on an aerial. Again, this is the subject portion that is asking for the rezoning. This is just a zoomed-in version of that same plan. Again, this is the subject area that is asking for the rezoning. This line here, everything on this side is zoned R2. Everything on this side is zoned C4. The plan shows for 9 3-story buildings are proposed with 2 different layouts consisting of 180 2-bedroom units and 36 3-bedroom units. So outlined here in red, those are the 3 units that will have 3-bedroom units. The plan also shows a clubhouse, swimming pool, basketball court, playground area, and a dog park area. And it's hard to tell. I was wondering why, but these are highlighted in blue. You just can't see those. These are the other buildings that are the 2-bedroom units. The plan also shows a clubhouse, swimming pool, basketball court, playground area, and dog park area. And those are highlighted here is the dog park, the playground area, basketball court, clubhouse, and swimming pool. The proposal meets the minimum parking requirements, which is 375, with 400 total spaces, which includes 84 parking spaces and 8 garages. And the development is required to have 1.24 acres of open space and is providing 7.13 acres of open space. So these are the garages shown on the plan as well. There's also a 20-foot landscape buffer abutting all of the adjoining properties, which is required to have a continuous high opacity screening. So highlighted here in green, you'll see that the perimeter, this is a cell tower site, so that's why you see this cut out there. The proposed lighting plan shows 0-foot candles at all property lines and does not exceed 2-foot candles on site. So everything that is highlighted there is either 1 to 2-foot candles, but you can see from the lighting plan that the applicant submitted that they are 0-foot candles at all property boundaries. The traffic study does not indicate a need for turning lanes on turning lanes or improvements on Highway 329. I'll defer those comments to Paula Wall, our traffic engineer, who will come up after this. The applicant will be required to upgrade the Apple Patch pump station to accommodate the future Brownsburg campus's mitigation to school capacity for this project. The current campus capacity is 116%, and the plan meets all other zoning regulations. This is the sign that was posted on June 12th. Showing the proposed change. This is from Highway 329 looking into the site. This is from inside the site. I could not go all the way back because there was a gate, but this is looking from Highway 329 from inside the site out to Highway 329. These are the mini storages here. This is the south view looking back in towards Crestwood. The south adjoiners, which is the American mini storages. This is the west view, so this is across the street. This is just another west view. This is the north view of Highway 329 going in towards Brownsboro. This is an existing tree line that is there. And this is just a zoomed in version of that existing tree line along Highway 329. There are 4 currently proposed binding elements. There should be no changes to the plan without review of the Oldham County Planning Commission and Engineers Office. The applicant is required to submit a landscape plan for review and approval by staff. The applicant must upgrade the Apple Patch pump station to accommodate the Brownsburg campus, and the preliminary plan must comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements at the time of approval, and no record plat will be approved until all standards are satisfied. The Planning Commission may amend, delete, or add additional binding elements at the public hearing. So in summary, the applicant is requesting a zoning change on 14 acres from R2 to R4, and then they are also requesting approval of a proposed development plan for 216 apartment units. And this would be a recommendation of a zoning change of either approval or denial to the city of Crestwood. And that is all that I have.
All right, Ms. Albee, thank you very much. Before we get into questions from the commissioners to the staff, I'd like to call on Ms. Wall do you have any comments or any presentation you'd like to make? She's our county traffic consultant. Name and address for the record, if you would.
Paula Wall with Neil Schaefer, 200 Whittington Parkway, Suite 205.
Okay.
40241, I think. Per Oldham County regulations, Neil Schaefer conducted a review of the traffic study. There was one initially submitted on May 30th. Some preliminary comments were made, and a revised was submitted last week on the 18th. Should be noted that this technically did not meet the threshold for a full traffic study. It was just under the 100 trip threshold, but it was recommended because it was so close to the threshold, and given the history in the area with the previous case and concerns of the neighbors, it was recommended that they perform a study, which I believe the applicant had already started to do the study even before I made that comment, so they were already in the process of performing that. Basically, the review was submitted to both the Transportation Cabinet and Oldham County for review. Overall, the study did not indicate there are any substantive errors or discrepancies in the study, method, data, or capacity. Just in summarizing the results as stated and conclusions as stated in the report, based upon the traffic volume of the traffic generated by the Cardin Farm Development and the amount of traffic forecasted for the analysis years of 20, 23, and 33, there will be a minimum impact to the network. The intersection will operate at a level of service C or better, and no improvements were required based on those estimates. It should be noted that the traffic analysis did not assume full development of the property. It did include all the apartments built, and it also did assume a future development of a 120-room hotel, which is, you know, the remaining part of the property is not proposed for development as of today. Just letting you know what it did and didn't include. The full development of the remaining property, depending on the land uses though, will likely require construction of auxiliary lanes on 329 at the access road in the future. That'll need to be analyzed at that time. For the proposed apartments, the weekday trips were estimated to be 1,175 total trips per day. As I said, this traffic study in the PM is less than 100, just about 100 trips in the peak hour. But from a total day perspective, it's 1,175 trips for this apartment complex. And that represents about 19% of the future average daily traffic on Kentucky 329 as estimated by the applicant, assuming 2018 we have a proposed average annual daily traffic of 4,600. The base for 2023, given a 2% growth per year, which is based on historical traffic data on 329, and then you add in the 1,175 trips, it will bring up the ADT on 329 to a little over 6,000. Just to kind of give you an idea, traffic engineers and the traffic standards use on a 2-lane typical road like 329, you would start looking at widening to maybe 3 lanes or doing improvements when you hit between about 10 and 15,000. So that's just to give you an idea where we are with that facility. And that's all I have.
Okay, we might have some questions here in just a little bit, but this time, Derek Shade, do you have any comments from the engineer's office on this particular docket? Shade, did you get sworn in earlier?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. An address for the record.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Derek Shade. I'm a staff engineer for Oldham County Fiscal Court here, part of the engineering department. I live at 5306 Foxwood Drive in Crestwood. The comments that we have pertaining to this project, we've already supplied through the TRC process. Those comments still apply. In summary, we had some specific concerns regarding the sanitary, the water line, and the road improvements. Per discussions at the last meeting that we had, the sanitary, water line, and road improvements are to be furnished by others. Our understanding is that these others are Bob and Gant Jones. We would like these construction plans furnished either before or concurrently with the construction plans that are being considered here today. In addition to that, the other comments we had were associated with the stormwater requirements. We reviewed those with the applicant, and they're in accordance with our ordinances. Other than that, we didn't have any specific comments.
Okay, thank you. And we might have some questions here for you just a little bit.
Okay.
All right, and with that, Mr. McWilliams. Williams. I get Joe and him mixed up. No, would you come forward?
We look a lot alike.
And were you sworn in, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just comments from the school system.
As you saw, there was an agreement reached between the board and the developer to improve the pumping station for the potential of the Brownsboro campus if and when that were to come to development. As you all know, we're in the middle of rebalancing the elementary schools, and then at that point, we'll see where we are and move forward from there. So I can answer any questions when you need me to.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, with that, now, Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff? Any questions for staff? Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. McWilliams.
Amy, would you throw up the site plan showing the buildings and everything again? Would you just sort of indicate to me what is considered open space on this drawing?
It would be any undeveloped space, it would be any of this space.
Okay, any
Yeah.
undeveloped space is considered open space.
It's kind of hard to draw on here, but any of the undeveloped space. It's not used for buildings and parking. Or drives.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any additional questions for staff? Yes, sir, Mr. Finney.
I have a question for Ms. Wall, please. This traffic study that shows the analysis on page 5, it says the 2003 volume was 4,100 vehicles per day. Are all your calculations made from that base?
Well, the applicant's engineer made the calculations, and I believe that was probably their base.
So a 15-year-old
2%.
base study?
I believe so, yes. Diane can.
That might be
You can ask the
question.
applicants.
I think that's, yeah, that's probably,
Okay, well, maybe I'm asking the wrong person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Diane can answer that.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
all right.
remember that the applicants has a traffic study done, and Paula reviews that study for compliance with standard practices and conclusions.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anything else for staff? Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll now move into the presentation by the applicant or representatives and others in support of the application. Mr. Clubb, I would assume that would be you. Okay. And if we could, I'd like to get everyone sworn in that might be speaking on behalf of the application. Okay. Ms. Feeman?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, and we'll get their name and addresses as they come forward. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Morning. Feels like I've done this before. I'm sure you all reviewed the application and would probably have the same feelings right now that I do. My name is Josh Clubb. I'm an attorney at Bramlin Clubb here in LaGrange, 206 North 2nd Street, directly across the street. I have the pleasure this morning of representing the applicant in this application, Stephen Edwards, who's here. Also, if I can just introduce the people that I do have here today, and certainly you all will be more than welcome to ask questions of all those people. But I have Stephen Edwards here. He's the applicant. His partner, longtime partner here, Doug Hawk, on this project is also in attendance. Realtor Patrick Pollard. We also have the property owners, the current property owners, the Jones family, that were represented today by Mr. Bob Jones, sitting here in the front row in the middle. His son, Gant Jones, who will also be assisting me with part of this presentation. On the engineering front, no particular order, we have Will Hagan here. He is with Kerry McGann Engineering in Shelbyville. He is our engineer, Stephen Edwards, engineer for the actual site plan. We also have Bill Berry here. He represents the Jones family. He'll be speaking to the remainder of the property as well as the intersection of the new road we're proposing to build out on Highway 329. We also have with us Diane Zimmerman, who's a traffic engineer who I know we already have some questions lined up for, so she'll be more than happy to answer those today. Before I start, I would be remiss if I didn't talk briefly about being back here again. Obviously, we were here. I watched the tape again last night. I believe it was August of last year, so we've had several months. I'd like the commission to realize, and I think it'll be clear here, that we listened to the concerns of the neighbors, we listened to the concerns of the commission, and at great delay, obviously from August until today, and great expense. We already had quite a bit invested in the previous piece of property we were here on. We decided to put all that aside and come back with a plan that we feel meets those concerns that were raised. And just real briefly, before we get started in the presentation, we heard from numerous neighbors in the neighborhood meeting till the time TRC when we got here, this development, needed to be closer to I-71. I don't think anybody would disagree. We can get much closer to I-71 than we put this property now. We actually border I-71 on the south side. We heard numerous concerns about stormwater runoff and how that was going to affect Old Coach Road and the stream that ran through the Glen Meadows property. You're going to hear today none of the stormwater runoff from this project will cross any adjoining landowners. All the stormwater runoff will lead either south up in this corner up in here, across I-71. The balance of the stormwater is not going to go down to the Glen Meadows subdivision. It will actually run down the property, cross Highway 329, and actually go the other direction back across I-71. We heard numerous comments about karst, about the topography. I don't know if anybody's been out there, but this particular piece of property, nowhere near the topography that was on the previous property. Karst features there are none that we're aware of on this property, and we have a letter, and we're going to talk about that today. We had talk about the view. We have slides about the view. I don't believe anybody in Glen Meadows subdivision will be able to see this. It's also off of 329. It'll be pretty difficult to see this particular development even from 329. Again, we checked that off the list. There was talk about century trees, landscaping on the previous property. This property, by and large, is a vacant piece of property. It's been used as farm. There are actually cattle grazing there now. We've taken care of that concern. The traffic plan. Last time we were having to make, I would term, rather significant improvements to the old Brownsboro Road there that the Glen Meadows residents use. We were attempting to solve what we viewed as a problem that already existed by straightening out the approach to 329. Some people didn't agree with us. We've taken care of that. We're building our own road here. Nobody other than our residents or future development on this property will have to use that road. We've also taken care of that concern. And finally, the last time we were here, one of the first things, I don't know if you all remember that night, but I don't think our application got called till maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. I know everybody was tired. I was as well. We didn't have our school capacity nailed down. And that, in hindsight, that may have been a mistake. I know we were on the road to getting that, but we weren't able to communicate that. Mr. Williams wasn't able to communicate that night because it hadn't been taken care of. We've checked that off the list as well. I think we actually had, Mr. Williams can verify this, but I think we actually had that agreement nailed down very shortly after that meeting was over, but you all didn't get to hear about that night, and that's not your fault, that's ours. That's been taken care of. We've made a commitment to Oldham County Schools to spend a significant amount of money to upgrade that pump station for future expansion, so we've checked that off the list. So having said all that, I'd like to at this time bring up Gant Jones with the Jones family. Gant has prepared a PowerPoint. We're going to have two different PowerPoints going this morning. Gant will start off. Gant, if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Gant Jones, 2910 Darby Creek Drive.
And what is your profession?
I'm an architect. My master's in urban planning.
All right. And is that what you do currently?
Yes.
All right. And what is your connection to this property?
Part owner to the property.
All right. And your father, Bob Jones, is here as well?
Yeah.
And who are the other part owners?
My brother and sister, Ann Clore and Clay Jones.
All right. And how long has your family owned this property?
Since the early 80s, I guess.
Okay.
As much as I remember.
All right. You have some slides that you've put together. Some of those are similar to the ones Ms. Alves presented,
Right.
but I ask you to be cognizant of the time. I've already used about 5.5 minutes of our time. If you can go through your first slides and please inform the commission about this particular tract of property.
Okay. So my intention is kind of just to revisit the existing conditions of the property. It's going to be reiterating what Amy had already showed you, but maybe emphasizing on certain elements of those existing conditions. First off, I wanted to emphasize that this property of 68 acres or so is within the city limits of Crestwood. I know it's a farm, but it's within the city limits of Crestwood, and what we're proposing is something at a higher density of residential use on this property. This is just reiterating what Amy had already shown as being R2 and C4 uses on the property. Adjacent to that are C4 uses, and across the street is industrial use, which is I4, I believe. This is just showing the adjacent landowners. Adjacent to where we are changing things, I'm showing that right in that area, we have two property owners Adjacent to it, the other adjacent property owners are ourselves, as well as if you want to consider the tower right in the middle. All right. I also wanted to emphasize that the closest point of the zoning change to Glen Meadows is around a quarter mile away. This is a study I did. I went to the site. I measured the height of the chain link fence, and then in the photo superimposed that height all the way up to the height of the tower. I estimate the tower to be 250 feet tall. It's actually 285 feet tall. But in this study, I want to do an analysis around the surrounding neighborhoods to see how visible the site would be to Glenarm and Glen Meadows. So as you can see, the first photo in the top of the diagram there, that is from the back corner. It's the highest elevation of Glen Meadows. That is right at this point up there. The red outline shows the apartment building, which you cannot see from that point. It's behind topography and trees, and in fact, it would be even lower considering that the tower is higher. Another point of view is the Glenarm point, which is this photo here. As you can see, is behind the trees and behind the topography. And finally, a point from right there, completely behind the topography. So I just wanted to emphasize that the site is not very visible from the surrounding areas. This is just emphasizing, reiterating what Amy has already talked about. And now I'd like to bring Stephen up to talk about the apartment complex.
Thank you, Gap. I'm going to switch my presentation here. All right, a lot of these slides you all have seen before. I think there's maybe a new face or two here, but Stephen Edwards and Doug Hawk have been in the apartment business for numerous years. This is not the first property similar to this that they have sought to develop. Between the two of them, they have over 60 years of combined construction experience. They started with single-family homes. They've expanded into multifamily units, and they have constructed, between the two of them, over 2,000 Class A apartment homes in the state of Kentucky. Stephen actually lives here in Oldham County. Doug, unfortunately, does not. He lives in Kenton County. He is a Kentucky resident. The two of them currently, or they have constructed, numerous Class A properties. Those include properties in Lexington, Kentucky, Georgetown, Ashland, Florence, Burlington. Closer to home, they've also developed Oldham Oaks. Stephen, back in what year was that, Stephen? 14 developed Oldham Oaks. That's a 216-unit apartment development that's currently located here in Oldham County. More recently, in the last few years, they've also developed Shelby Oaks, which is located behind the movie theater over in Shelbyville, if anybody's familiar with that. And those would be excellent examples of similar properties, although we'll talk about here in just a minute. The materials and the construction on this project is actually more upscale from either of those. Just a few pictures of some similar apartments. Georgetown Apartments, Providence Hill. You'll also see pictures of some of the amenities at some of these properties. Independent Oaks Apartments. That's a picture of Oldham Oaks. Crestwood Commons. Talk just briefly about what a Class A property means. Class A property is a market rent property. There is no subsidized housing here. These are truly market rent apartments. They would be all brick with engineered siding on porches and breezeways. As Ms. Alvey's already stated, they'd be 2- and 3-bedroom units. That's a change from the last time. I believe we did have one building that had some 1-bedroom units. That is not proposed in this particular proposal. They're owner-managed, 24-hour on-site management, 24-hour on-site maintenance, emergency maintenance. There will be a clubhouse with amenities, park-like outdoor amenities, high-end exterior and interior amenities, high-quality construction using quality materials and quality landscaping. The picture of some of the insides of homes that would be comparable to what we're proposing to build. They have balconies, screened-in porches, third-floor vaulted ceilings, crown molding in the living room, dining room, overhead lighting in bedrooms, living room and dining room, window blinds, washer dryer connections, fully furnished kitchens, with smooth top electric ranges, dishwashers, anything you would expect in a first-class property. Walk-in closets would be in these units. 2 full bathrooms with linen closets would be in both 2 and 3 bedroom units, and all of those master bedrooms have a master bathroom plus another full bath for the second or third bedroom, as the case may be. All first floor units in this apartment building would be handicap accessible. So that's about a third of the units would be handicap accessible. There would be wooded views available. We're going to talk in just a minute about the boundary line to the rear of this property that borders 2 property owners. There's actually significant natural buffering that's in place. We intend to keep as much, if not all of that natural buffering as we can, in addition to planting additional buffering, which we'll talk about just in a minute. The property also, in addition to outdoor parking, will have brick garages with openers available. A dog park, that's kind of twofold. There are residents that have dogs. They'll be able to take their dogs there, and also it will keep them away from neighboring properties. There'll be a playground, covered bike storage, a basketball court, a grilling area, picnic area, as well as a pet washing station. And these are pictures of the laundry facilities and some of the clubhouse facilities that would be similar to what we would be building at this site. Also will be a swimming pool, a 24-hour fitness center, a 24-hour laundry facility was on the previous screen, a community coffee bar and kitchen, business lounge with Wi-Fi. And the pictures, I think, as you see here, show a very nice property. And these are actually pictures that we're taking of the properties you've already constructed, correct, Stephen? Again, these are just some of the properties of a first-class property, high-end exterior and exterior amenities, 24-hour on-site management clubhouse with amenities. The residents that are going to be living here would be required to have gross monthly income at least 3.5 times the monthly apartment rent. They would be required to have exemplary rental history with good credit or no credit. Obviously, some of the people that would be renting these houses would be young professionals who haven't had an opportunity to establish a credit history, and my client doesn't typically discriminate against that lack of credit, and must have a good background history. Steve, if you want to come up for just a moment. This is and we have a color rendering. This is a rendering of the building that you're proposing to build, correct?
That's correct.
Can you talk a little bit about the construction materials?
Mr. Clubb,
Yeah.
let's get him name and address.
Stephen Edwards, 1801 Button Lane, LaGrange.
Stephen, we've made a few changes since the last application, though. Can you tell the commission about what the building materials that you're going to be used are and some of the quality features of these buildings?
Well, the roof pitch lines have changed for. Yeah, go ahead.
We worked extensively with the property owners. The Jones family made clear that they were not interested in anything but a first-class project, which we were already presenting, but we did make some changes. They made some suggestions.
Right.
You want to go through those?
Can I talk about the history?
Sure. And Gand, as an architect, has jumped in with us too and makes some
If you would,
upgrades.
get a little bit closer to the microphone there in the
Sure.
center.
So initially, when they came in and wanted to propose doing apartments, we were very interested in that. And we looked at their existing Oldham Oaks property, and in our opinion, we felt that is a very neutral-looking building, and we wanted to take what they do in their system of how they build things and provide superficial treatments to the exterior to increase its aesthetic quality. We want to make it more of a dynamic building, but without interfering with their construction process. So we could probably refer back to one of our renderings, but we work.
So you can speak to the colors.
You want me to- okay.
That's fine.
Go back to that slide, number 7. So as you can see here, what we did, we're thinking of ways of breaking the facade up rather than just one solid color throughout. We looked at doing a 2 brick tone, a darker base with a central portion being dark with a lighter brick tone on the top. We introduced elements as far as simple techniques in an architecture facade, just adding shutters. As simple as that can really bring that facade up, as well as putting archways in the entry zones. looking at different types of way dividing lights that are kind of going with trends these days, where it's just a single bar or maybe just a cross. As well as we wanted to increase the roof's pitch as much as possible, that a truss could go down the highway. Increasing that roof pitch helped with the volume of the structure. Looking at it kind of at more of a three-dimensional view. Anything you want to add to that?
No, so we've worked hand in hand with Gant to, as an architect, he's brought some great changes to our, sorry, here's the microphone. So we've worked hand in hand with Gant to bring some improvements to the building, and this is, I think, by far the best iteration we've had on this particular product that we build. I'm very pleased with his improvements, and as you can see, they are numerous from previous properties.
Let me switch back to our previous presentation here. Stephen, we can go through here. This is a typical layout of a 2-bedroom unit, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And the 3-bedroom unit obviously is bigger and has a 3rd bedroom. Those 3-bedroom units also just have 2 baths, 1 master bath, and then a shared bath for the two other bedrooms, correct?
Yes, they each have 2 bathrooms.
All right. Walk-in closets would be in each bedroom, regardless of whether that's the master bedroom or one of the spares.
That is correct.
There is laundry provided in each unit, although there is community laundry also provided for those who don't own a washer and dryer short-term, correct?
Yeah, a couple of things that we do a little bit unique to some other properties. So although we do have laundry facilities in each apartment home, we actually offer a laundry facility in the clubhouse, which is awfully convenient for folks if they have a washer dryer breaks down or need an extra hand there with that. We also have if you'll notice on some other properties you may have visited, you'll see trash dumpsters on corners and numerous dumpsters throughout the property. We actually have, at a great expense, one centralized compactor where the garbage is taken, makes for much cleaner, neater property. So there's a couple of little things we do a little bit different.
Stephen, one other thing I wanted to bring you up here to talk about is, can you please describe for the commission who's a typical resident of a property like this?
Typical resident for property would be young professionals. We have a lot of policemen, people in the emergency rescue, teachers, a few families scattered throughout, but primarily, as you can see, our breakdown with 182 bedrooms and 36 threes. We're mostly young professionals or people starting out in the workforce.
I don't want to tie you down because I know it's not built yet and things can change, but if this property were existing today, what would be the typical rent ranges for these 2- and 3-bedroom units?
Typical rent range for this type of property would be roughly $10.50 for a 2-bedroom and $13.50 for a 3-bedroom.
Okay. And what's your average turnover rate? I know that's a question that comes up a lot.
Well, in any rental property, that's really it's hard to pin down. But we do have a very great percentage of folks that are in there for a long period of time.
Okay.
But there is some turnover, and our leases are generally a minimum of a 1-year lease.
Okay. If we can go down just a few slides, the buffering there on the front of this property, the Jones family is going to continue to own that, correct?
That's correct.
And there's been no discussions between you and the Jones, or if there have been discussions, we're in agreement as to whatever buffering they would require between the two parties, correct?
That is correct.
On the south side, it's a triangle, so on the south side, we have I-71, and right now there's an existing fence row there. I guess it's grown up. Is the plan to retain as much of that buffering as possible from I-71?
Yeah, so this property is unique in that it has 2 outstanding landscape buffers already in place, very tall, mature trees and shrubs and landscape of all types, and our intention is to keep every bit of that as we can in place. There's no reason to take that out. Most of it is adjacent to the property line, and it's an incredible immediate landscape buffer.
And the back property line would be included in that same statement?
That is correct, along the entire back property line.
And if any of those trees or existing landscaping had to be removed for construction, drainage, or something of that nature?
Sorry, you're talking to each other, you got to speak up.
I'm sorry. I've never been told I wasn't speaking loud enough, but I will do my best to speak up.
All of a sudden it got into the conversation.
Sure. So the back property line as well, your intention is to leave as much of that natural vegetation as possible, correct?
That is correct.
And if there were to have to be any removed for whatever reason, and again, that would be a last result, what is your intention as far as replacing that, if any?
It will be replaced. And this is an example of some of the typical plants. I think in some of the previous meetings we had, there was some talk about using as many plants that are in landscaping that's native to Kentucky. And we typically do that anyhow, but we even gave greater attention to that. And you'll see that just about every product on that landscape page is native in some type of form to Kentucky.
Right. Obviously, the Thuja green giant will be a fast-growing tree that's not native.
That's an exception,
If we need some fast-growing cover for a big hole, obviously that may be an option short-term, but the rest of these trees are trees that you've planted in the past and proposed to plant on this property, correct?
That is correct. We would submit a landscape plan that would have to be approved with our construction plan as well.
Okay. Obviously, Stephen, I'm going to make you available for questions if the commission has any, but if we can bring Will up real quick. Please state your name and address.
Sure. Will Hagan. I'm a licensed engineer land surveyor and principal engineer with Carey P. McGann Consulting Engineers. We are located at 506 Main Street in Shelbyville, Kentucky.
Thank you, Will. This site plan, is this a site plan that you created?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to talk about just a few things. What is the total open space on this project?
The 7.13 acres of the 14-acre site, which would be 51%.
All right, and that's more than is required by the ordinance, correct?
Correct.
And what is the density requirement for an R4?
16 units an acre.
All right, and what are we?
15.4.
Okay, so we're below the maximum allowed density in R4 as well.
That is correct.
Setbacks from side and rear yards, what are those required?
We would have a 25-foot setback and then a 20-foot landscaping buffer, which has been discussed.
All right, and does that exceed the regulations set forth by the Oldham County Planning Commission?
Yes.
All right. If we can talk also briefly about parking spaces, what are the number required and what are the number that we proposed here?
Be 375 would be the minimum required, and we would be at 400.
Okay.
With 84 garage spots.
All right, and we have, the 84 garage spots are included in that 400?
Correct.
And we've also provided sufficient handicap parking as required by the ordinance as well?
That is correct.
All right. From your review of this site plan, are you aware of any waivers or variances that would be requested for this site?
None at this time.
All right. Let's talk about stormwater.
Sure.
I see arrows all over the screen there. Can you explain what those arrows are and what they represent?
Sure. Those would be what we would anticipate to be a proposed watershed. Water would exit the property in 2 locations, and in both those locations, we would have what would be called proposed detention areas. Might draw on here. We would have one in the eastern corner of the site, then one here as you enter into the property.
Okay. Those arrows are kind of hard to follow, but if you could summarize those, does any water leave this property over an adjoining property to the north?
No.
No water leaves the property to the north?
No.
So all the property would exit, how? How's it going to get off this property?
Yeah, property would exit in each of the proposed detention locations through an outlet structure, which we would size and design for each basin. Both basins would be dry detention basins, and then they would leave via head wall. For our western basin, it would exit onto the Jones property where there's a drainage swell which is currently existing.
And that would be the majority of the water?
It would be majority water, but the other portion of the water would leave on the eastern corner of the site onto I-71, and our calculations would be reviewed by the state, which was made mention in the county engineer TRC letter to our office.
And the county engineer said that those would be required to be submitted and approved prior to construction plans being submitted and approved?
With their office and the state.
And that typically does not happen until after the zone change has been approved. It's later in the process, correct?
That is, to my knowledge, correct.
Okay. There's also a secondary detention basin that's proposed as part of this project that's not shown on this slide that'll be come up in just a minute. Is that correct? Also on the Jones property?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. And that would further help reduce the flow?
Yes.
Will any of the water that leaves this site travel back to the north to the stream that runs into Glen Meadows?
No, when we size our eastern basin there, I would anticipate a berm along the northern edge, which we would
You got to draw on the screen
draw
because
on the
pointing doesn't help.
drawing in the air. Can I clear this? Sure. We would anticipate a berm And that's how we would obtain our volume in that location.
Okay. Have you done preliminary calculations on this site?
We have.
Do you have any doubt that there's insufficient room on this property to retain the water from the property?
No, with a 14-acre site, we would be able to work around and obtain the needed volume in both locations. So our post-development flow would be less than or equal to the pre-development flow, which is the regulating stormwater theory.
As you stand here today, there's no doubt about that?
No, sir.
All right. But even regardless of what you think, before construction plans are approved, that would have to be reviewed by the county engineer before we could begin construction?
Sure, the county has a 14-page stormwater review checklist. They would go over everything we submit, and then we would enter into a back and forth with the county engineer until they're satisfied and we meet all their requirements and our calculations are approved.
All right. As far as karst topography, are you aware of any karst topography on this property?
You know, I am not.
All right.
Mr. Flood, would you just, for folks that don't know what karst is, could you just give a short definition?
Sure. Karst topography would be sinkholes, caves, any subsurface water drainage features on the property, correct?
Yes, and to jump back into our previous site, there were some rock outcropping features which were picked up on the initial site topo survey. None of those features were present on this site. But, you know, with karst, anything underground, you know, I would strictly be speaking of a surface, you know, underground is
Okay.
ground.
Thank you.
If there were such features, you would have listed them on your survey, correct?
Correct.
All right. Second question is if through excavation and development of this property, something were to be discovered that was covered over,
Sure.
that we just couldn't see, is that something that can be handled?
Yes, you're starting to get into another phase of civil engineering in a way in the geotechnical world, but you know, there's a world of solutions and mitigation procedures which will stabilize buildings or foundations.
Okay, and that's something that'll be addressed in the construction phase?
Yes.
All right. The topography of this land, can you generally describe it for those who may have not been to the property?
I would, you know, generalize it as a rolling property, which you know, lends itself, you know, to the roads and our drainage. You know, I'd have to look at it to know the exact. I think that the 14 to 18 feet across the site.
Of difference in elevation?
That would be correct. And clearly we utilize the two low areas on the eastern corner and on the western edge where the entrance road. We're using natural drainage.
So let's follow up on the 14 feet of rise and fall for the
Sure,
entire 14-acre property. The plan is not to cut this property and make it a totally flat development, correct?
Well, that is correct. We, you know, to keep earthwork quantities down, we would try to maintain existing contours where possible. And we follow those lines when establishing our finished floor elevation, our first floor elevation of each building pad, and then kind of back into it from there.
And the difference in elevations also used for drainage, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
That's how we get the water back to the retention basin and then off the property eventually, correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I don't think I have any further questions for you. Obviously, I'm going to make you available to the commission as well. I would like to spend just a minute talking about traffic. Diane, if you could. Can? Let me pull up the connection down there at 329.
I'll introduce myself while you're doing that.
Thank you.
Diane Zimmerman, 12803 High Meadows Pike, Prospect, Kentucky, 40059. I am a licensed professional engineer, and I prepared the traffic impact study for this project.
Before we go too far, I know there was a question earlier regarding the counts, the 2003 number that was cited in your traffic study. Can you please address what counts and what dates you used?
Sure. Specifically on page 2, traffic counts were made on April the 17th of 2018 in front, near the site at the intersection, actually, of the I-71 ramp. The reference that was questioned on page 5, which has now become page 6 in my copy, refers to the traffic shed analysis. In 2003, Oldham County did a thoroughfare plan, and part of that thoroughfare plan was an identification of the level of service for every road in this county in 2003. That document has not been updated since 2003, but the regs on traffic impact studies require a reference back to that. So that is why this 2003 information is cited here in this paragraph. It is also important to note that the volume was 4,600 in 2003, and it's estimated today to still be 4,600. So in the 15 years since this count was made in 2003, there was no change. There's been no significant change in the volume on Kentucky 329. So if you have further questions, we'll get back to that, but hopefully that clarifies the dates.
Ms. Zimmerman, your study did not warrant any improvements to Highway 329 based upon the development that's being proposed, correct?
That is correct.
And generally, we are talking about a road that is about 420 feet to Brownsboro Alt, is that correct?
That is correct.
And about 1,200 feet, the entrance will be about 1,200 feet north of the southbound exit ramp on I-71.
That is correct.
All right. And certainly I will make you available for questions if they have any more, but I want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you want to come back up and finish out on the remaining property that your family will continue to own?
So what I want to finish up with is the connection to the apartments from 329. We're proposing a road accessing kind of in the middle of the front of the site, continuing back, when arrows will happen, back to the apartments. By use of the topography, we're not making significant cuts to grade out a straight path there, but kind of move with the topography all the way to the back. The right-of-ways will be 60 feet wide towards the back and get wider as you proceed to the front, because in the future there may be development where we need more lanes coming out of the property, but at this time we have no plans for anything to be developed in the future.
Kent, before you go any further on, this is a good slide to talk about this. Can you tell the commission what this property is currently being used for, specifically the 14-acre site?
14 acres in the back, it's grazing cattle.
All right. There are numerous round marks
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah.
They're all through here.
Yeah.
There has been suggestion that those indicate karst topography.
That's not karst topography.
Right. Can you tell the commission what those are?
Those are hay bales. Those are where cattle have been feeding.
Okay, thank you.
Another important aspect about this road is about 0.38 miles from 329, so it's a sizable distance away from 329. Next slide, just want to indicate how far it is from the significant intersections. 420 feet from Brownsboro Alt back here, and 1,200 from the intersection of I-71. These are some photos kind of indicating where the entry is onto the site. You can see the cones here and here. That would be the center of the entry onto the site. This is kind of at the apex of the hill where traffic has lost its momentum. You can see it from further down by here. Clear this out. This being the entry into the mini storage. That red dot up there is the entry onto the site. This is back by the Brownsboro alternative route, and that is the point up there. As you can see, it's an uphill climb to that point. And momentum of cars and vehicles is at its lowest. This is a drawing to indicate sewers. This is a diagrammatic drawing, obviously. We anticipate putting sewers to the south and then connecting into an existing manhole that is on the property in the bottom corner. With water, electric, data, and gas running on the other side up to the property. Water service, if I'm not mistaken, is on the other side of 329. Detention, we are going to reuse a pond that's been dried since the 80s. We never really understood why it was dry until we got into investigating on this project. I determined that there was an old standpipe at the center of the pond that would collect water that would flow into that standpipe, flow down and carry out. That got knocked down probably in the early 80s, fell apart, so it never holds water anymore. We're going to modify it for a detention to handle any road runoff. That's that.
Thank you, Ken. Mr. Chairman, I know that it's going to disappoint everyone if I leave 13 and a half minutes on the clock, but I believe that concludes our presentation. I will say that we've passed out a copy of our presentation to anyone. All of my witnesses who've testified, and plus a few more, are available for questioning. I've also handed the commission a proposed motion that I believe would withstand any challenge and is supported by the facts that we presented. I'll be going over that later in my closing statement. Based on that, we'll conclude subject to rebuttal.
All right, thank you. And with that, is there anyone here that would like to speak in support of this application? Anyone here that would like to speak in support of? Okay, seeing none, now we'll move into the testimony and questions by those opposing the application. And I know there's several folks here. Could I get you all that would like to speak, either questions or testimony? Would you all stand, and then we'll get everybody sworn in at one time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm showing 8 folks that would like to testify or have questions. So, Ms. Feeman, would you swear them in? No, 9, okay, 9, thank you. Ms. Feeman, swear them in, please.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
All righty, and whoever would like to go first, and we'd like to just remind you that we've got 50 minutes for testimony or questions, and so, please, when you all speak, kind of be aware that there's 9 other folks that would like, or 8 other folks that would like to speak behind you, so we want to make sure we've got, everybody has enough time. So, and we'll get your name and address as we move forward.
I'm Gary Kybler, 7401 Old Zering Road in Crestwood.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess this is questions and rebuttal, or?
It can be testimony and questions by those opposing the application.
Okay. First question is on the traffic study. It seems that that was done for Carden Farm. At least that's what's on the front page of the traffic study. So I guess
Mr. Kyber, make sure that you kind of speak towards the center speaker there, so everybody can hear.
So I'm just, first of all, wondering why the traffic study was done for Carden Farm and what Carden Farm is.
Okay. Mr. Clubb, do you want to respond to that?
I can answer that very quickly.
Okay.
This property was purchased by the Jones family in the early 80s from Mr. Carden. That's what the Jones family refers to the property as, and that's what they told Ms. Zimmerman and they called it. So that's all that means.
Okay. Mr. Kyber?
Okay. Also, I wanted to just state that the attendance is down from what it normally would be. We had 3 people that would be here to testify that were very active the last time around, but they're on vacation out of the country and can't be here, so sorry about that. We also had an attorney, as you know, in the previous hearing on the property next door to this property. Unfortunately, that attorney had to recuse himself because of a conflict with Mr. Jones. So we're not represented here today, and that kind of surprised us, and so I'm not Barry, so sorry about that. The school capacity thing, I've already talked to Mr. Williams, and if he wants to rebut what I have to say, he can come up and do so. But that, I guess, makes a lot of us wonder about this whole thing, because all we've done here is we've moved the exact same project that we turned down by an 11-0 vote less than a year ago, one property over to the next adjacent property. And the only difference in the cast of characters here is the owner of the property. And in fact, I think we've increased the number of units, right, from 196 to 216, is that correct?
You need to address it.
From 196 to 216. So I asked Mr. Williams about this contract or whatever that the school board approved in a meeting the same evening, a specially called meeting, I might add, that was done the same evening as the TRC meeting to approve this mitigation. And I asked if there was any contract on specifics of how much money was involved or
what capacity increase was going to be done or anything, and the answer to that is no. There's a verbal agreement only, according to the board attorney. So, in other words, we've got a mitigation of capacity, which in the first place is not necessary for the elementary school, because the elementary school actually has existing capacity to satisfy the 40% of the 90 students that would be involved. So 36 elementary students in the apartment complex, again, according to numbers I got from Mr. Williams, and they have 38 available at Kenwood Station. So why are we mitigating a development for a future Brownsboro school that may or may not ever come to pass for elementary students that aren't necessary, and we're going to provide pump capacity for sewage increase? You know, well, I'm not going to go into all the other adjacent properties and so forth with school property, but I think you guys probably know a lot of that history, and if not, I can tell you later on. And the 120-room hotel, I heard that come up. Where is that? Is that on the property? Is that across the street? Is that? I mean, we have a traffic study supposedly that includes that, but this is the first I've ever heard of it.
Mr. Kivler, I mean, do you?
No response? Or?
Well, they will have an opportunity to respond.
Okay. So, you know, I think that's pretty much it. I think what we're going to say in the final analysis is that we don't have anything different than we had less than a year ago, except more apartments. And we've got, with the exception possibly of the karst situation, and I'm not too sure about that, every other thing remains the same. We're in the same general neighborhood, and you've got a lot of people here that don't agree. The traffic study pointed out an important thing. Yes, the traffic is not much different than it was 15 years ago. There's a reason for that, because those of us that live out there want it that way. And we don't want 216 apartments and a mitigation by the school to add a school and more commercial development and a hotel and all of this stuff. That's only going to, I guarantee you that traffic study, we're going to have turning lanes, a widening of the road, and, you know, all sorts of stuff down the road, which of course I know is part of the whole master plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, who would like to come next? Okay, yes, ma'am. We'll get your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Sue Massey, and my address is 7417 Dorsey Court, Crestwood, Kentucky 40014.
Okay.
They have made a lot of improvements to the plan of the apartment complex. However, still my concern is the school capacity, the traffic capacity. When they were talking about the water runoff, they directed the conversation to the runoff on I-71. However, there was runoff that was going to be closer to Highway 329, which inevitably leads down 329 because it is on a slope that goes downhill. So I have a question about that. Perhaps that can be addressed. Excuse me. My next question is on the entrance. The entrance looks like it is right at the peak of a hill, which would to me would be a blind entrance. We're talking about 400 parking spaces, so that's potentially 400 cars that would be entering and exiting right there in a blind spot. So I have questions about that. And other than that, we had a comprehensive plan for Oldham County. It does not include this type of development. So I don't understand how that's going to be disregarded, because there was a lot of thought and planning that went into that comprehensive plan. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Massey. All right, who would like to go next? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Debbie Stevens, 3410 Halls Hill Road. So I just need to confirm some numbers. So the increase in traffic is how much, Diane? In your study, the increase is how much?
Come back up, if you would.
Was it 1,700?
1,175 was the number. Ms. Walsh quoted.
1,175, and right now it's 4,600 and
Yes.
something, okay. So that's about a 35% increase in traffic. One fell swoop, 36, and that's not gonna create an issue or a need for widening. Then we're talking about bringing the school in, which we gotta factor in. So now we've got a 36, give or take, increase in traffic, and then we're gonna bring a school with traffic. Anybody sitting here has driven I-71. We all live here. You hit the exit 14 and then the rest stop, and you just cringe your teeth because you know there's a good possibility there's going to be an issue. So you got Crestwood that's building up, and now we're saying we're going to pour in another 36+%. When the school comes, a lot more, and when the 120-room hotel, wherever that is, and then the all little fast food shops and things that come with this road is not meant to take this. And then I have a question. How many of the developments that you have done do you still manage?
We'll, let's get those questions, they can take notes and whatever, and we'll get, let them answer those in their time here too.
All right, I'm because of my schedule, I'm gonna have to leave. So the point I'm trying to make with that is we see the kind of resident that is being represented here. That would be if they maintained ownership. That's what my concern is.
Okay, all right. All right, who would like to go next?
Hi, Stephanie Hawkins, Richmond 07 Ridgecrest. I'd like to state that I'm an elected nominee who will be on the ticket in November as a magistrate for District 6. And so I'm speaking from that viewpoint. And one of the platforms that I ran on going into the primary is the development and overdevelopment of Oldham County. It's something that I am passionate about, and I learned in campaigning that a lot of people in Oldham County are passionate about it, and in turn I was successful in the primary. Running on that foundation, on that was part of my campaign that I was running on. I wanted to ask, how would it benefit those who already live here, having 216 units in 14 or 11 acres, or whatever it is? We talked about setting a precedent in the last docket item, and I think naturally we like to think that we don't make our decisions based on a precedent that was set, but then in that same conversation it was referenced apartments on Main Street in LaGrange. So we like to think that we don't default to the precedents, but this would set a precedent, and we like to think that we would think of everything individually, but in reality, this would set a precedent that we would default to, and you all probably would in turn default to, just because it's human nature. Couple of questions for the developers. I heard and I saw a picture of shutters and an increased roof pitch, and that sounded like that would equal luxury. That's what they were doing to make it luxury. And to me, adding shutters and an increased roof pitch does not equal luxury. So I wanted to just point that out. That's from my perspective. I want to know also if Mr. Edwards manages the property that he builds, because I would like to know I believe that it's speculation that police officers, teachers, et cetera, live in the apartments. I don't know. I'm not judging. I would just like to hear a little bit more of facts on that rather than speculation, and perhaps if he manages the properties that he develops, then he would be able to give us facts on that rather than speculation. Another thing I saw that concerned me was the buffering in the landscape. If you all remember going to those public meetings regarding the Walmart on Highway 329, there was a lot, I mean, beautiful renderings. Do you all remember that a couple years ago? Beautiful renderings of what that would look like on Highway 329. And what the results are when you drive past Walmart is not what the renderings indicated. So I have a concern with that, these renderings with all the beautiful trees and a variety of trees. Is that going to be what ends up happening? And another thing, I haven't heard anything about signs. I would like to see the signs. I would also like to know, are the setbacks included in the open space? That's one question. The location of the detention that we talked about, the pond, I think that they said dried out, is that also included in the open space? Can bodies of water be included in that? And how big is that detention? It's currently zoned R2, which would be 3.63 units per acre. I believe that that the owner of the land, everybody else, would make a significant amount of money if it continued to be in R2. 3.63 units per acre, I think, would not increase the traffic. And I mean, do we want that road widened? It would really take away the rural feel that the people in Brownsboro have come to enjoy. And I would just ask how this would benefit those who already live here. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who would like to go next? We had 9 folks that stood up or said they would like to speak. Okay, yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I didn't stand up.
Oh, okay.
So I
Get you
swear
sworn
to
in.
tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
My name is Bruce Bunger. I'm at 2750 Halls Hill Road, 40014 Crestwood, Brownsboro, I'd like to say. My point is I could vote for, I think, an R2 development here, but nonetheless, this is the, gosh, can that be tuned up? The notice that was put in the paper, and it does go to the point of saying that we're here to zone for R2 to R4. I don't read anything about an apartment complex being approved in this action. And I think we need to have some translucency in what we do and what we say and how it goes.
Quickly for you, that's what the second item is, the development plan, and that's there are 2 applications. One is for the rezoning and the other is for the development plan, which is the apartments.
I think if more Brownsboro neighbors saw something more than a development plan versus the plan that was stated back in August, turnout probably would have been larger. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, who else would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Thank you, and hello. My name's Steve Wagner. I'm at 6600 Old Zaring Road, Crestwood. I want to thank you all for the time and devotion you give to these difficult decisions. Most of my points have already been made, and I won't repeat them in the interest of time, but a couple specific questions. One is, the definition of open space in the plan is a curious one. As it was shown on the maps, I would not think that would meet anybody's definition of the real purpose of open space. It sounds like it was defined as any place that the developer couldn't put a building or a car. And some of those open spaces actually seem to be the same water retention basins that are being talked about. I would think the language of open spaces that is encouraged has to do with flying kites and having picnics and playing ball and walking dogs and other such enjoyment of the outdoors. I don't think this type of development is addressing those concerns and interests. Second point, I would ask you to scrutinize the traffic study carefully. I'm not an engineer. We don't have expert testimony, but anybody that has driven 329 won't be able, in my opinion, to say that the traffic out there hasn't changed in 16 years. You can't get on and off the interstate now. And related to that, the language that this development is serving the comprehensive plan because it is close to avenues of traffic to get people to employment makes no sense at all. You can't drive in and out of town to Louisville now. The traffic on 71 is impossible. And that is affecting our property values already and our lifestyle out here. To add this kind of increased volume, did I hear how many different trips per day? I've lost track, but I can't imagine the additional traffic on that road. Finally, a more general point, if I may. But you're being asked to give away what I view as the most valuable asset our county has, and that is our lifestyle. We're not Jefferson County, and I have nothing against apartments. I've lived in them myself. My children live in them. They're a great way to be. This one is just being placed in a location that it shouldn't be. Our very asset out here is the character of the nature of this county, our neighborhoods, our open spaces, our farmlands, our pleasing visual views. Nobody has considered, as far as I've heard, the effect of this as people drive up and down 71. We're not protecting our visual impact. We're diminishing the aesthetic quality of our very life by allowing this kind of development. We should be protecting the rural, bucolic nature of the gift of where we are. It reminds me of that story that I don't remember well, but the neighbors complained about the farmer's pig. They said they were ugly, so he put lipstick on them. It was still a pig. This is an apartment complex, and I don't mean to suggest that it's a pig. I happen to like pigs, but it's still a high density, 15 units per acre in the wrong place. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who else would like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Ann Peoples. I live at 6901 Old Zering Road in Crestwood. My husband and I bought some acreage there, 55 acres, in 1979. So I'm one of the older people here. Since we had our offices near the airport, we have seen traffic from 1980, when we moved, until today. I can absolutely confirm what other people have said about the inability to turn left when you exit 14 from I-71, which we had to do for 25 years till we sold our business. And I just can't understand how the traffic studies by experts, I'm no expert, I'm just a resident who tries to get off that exit and turn left. Coming down I-71 from the north to just exit right should be easier, but it also is almost life-threatening to make some of these turns. I'm very close friends with the Clays. I hate to even protest here. My husband has shot many doves with Bob, and we're good friends. But this isn't about friendship. This is about a concern from people who have lived in this beautiful rural community, pristine and whatnot, and I understand growth is a necessity. But just for a hypothetical, if these 216 units were built and the increased traffic came to fruition where we had to put a turn lane and possibly even a light. What's to keep the developers from developing all that interim space from the north side to 329? There's a lot of acreage there, and who knows the future? Who knows if you have 216 apartments approved, whether you would be approving another one 10 years down the road. I probably won't be here, but my kids and grandkids sure are, and many of our younger neighbors. So that's about all I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Who would like to go next? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Barb McMakin, 4231 Glenarm Road, Crestwood, but, you know, it's a Crestwood address, but right there in the neighborhood. We've been there since 1984, and the people who have already spoken have covered a lot of my concerns, but I did want to bring up again, if I understood it right, this 2003 traffic shed had to be cited just because that it had to be brought up. But I find it really difficult to believe that a new one is not warranted and that a new one would not be any different than the one that was done over 15 years ago. And so I was also concerned about maybe, is there a way to take a census to find out how many people have moved into the area since 2003? That right there says to me that we have a lot more traffic than we did then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? I think I had three more that that's originally stood up and would like to speak. Anyone else? Okay. Last chance here. We'll have an opportunity for, a rebuttal and at the end and a final statement, but anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I wasn't going to talk, but I decided
Get sworn in?
Yes, I did.
Name and address, please.
Karin Zoltow, and I live at 4300 Glenarm Road.
Could you spell your name, please?
Karin, last name Soltau.
Thank you.
So I'm running for magistrate in this district, so I've been speaking to people in the area, and there is a lot of concern. Full confession first, I have to say, I've fought apartments on a rural area. It was a dairy farm, and spoke at a similar kind of planning and zoning, and was successful in beating it. Now, I was 8 years old, and I was terrified, but I got up and spoke on behalf of children. And so here I am now again, coming full circle, speaking after talking to a lot of the residents and neighbors. I think the attorney would make a good salesman for renting apartments. He did a good pitch about that. But my concern, and I think a concern a lot of the neighbors, is about, do apartments really fit in a rural setting like that? Back when I was 8, it was the same concern. Do apartments fit in a setting like that on a dairy farm? And eventually ended up being housing, and they voted it down. So luxury apartments, boy, that's could be debated. But apartments in that kind of setting, with looking at the Brownsboro plan, the Oldham County plan, and then hearing, he's got a checklist that he's checked off, but I think there's another checklist coming. Hotel, school, development of the rest of the property. What's that gonna do? And trees. To me, when I hear about putting up all these trees, what are you trying to hide? Does it fit? If it fits and is right for the area, you don't need to hide it, because it looks part of the rural character of Brownsboro and that part of the community, which is what I've heard a lot of the residents talking about, concerns about losing that beauty. And, just these apartments, Hikes Point, I hate to say that, that's where I grew up, it fits there. But Brownsboro, I don't see the connection. So you can try to hide it, but it's not connected to the type of community and the area and what people I hear the residents saying they love about it.
Thank you.
Can you give us your address again?
Ma'am? Ma'am?
4300 Glenarm.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we got it. Oh, the address was what we were needing. Okay, anyone else would like to speak? Questions or testimony? Okay, we'll now move into the questioning of the applicant and those opposing the application by the commission. Commissioners, do you all have questions for either the applicant or the folks that have testified? Mr. Horton.
Thank you for the applicant. You mentioned a proposed detention basin. Was that on the map that we looked at, or
Yes, sir.
or is that going to be the pond on the other property? That go ahead.
There are three separate detentions. One is going to be the pond. I just passed it. This is on the existing property. That'll be secondary.
That's specifically just for the road.
That's for the road.
Okay.
That's for the road. That's on the property that's not being developed at this time, other than the access road to the project that we proposed. That's an yellow. So the detention basin's on this property, and I realize it's hard to see there, and I have a full size if you'd like to see it. But the first proposed retention basin is right in here. Obviously, it doesn't run into the road. My finger didn't hit exactly where it needed to. And the second is up in this area. And if you follow the arrows on that sheet, basically, the arrows show the flow of the water. The break is somewhere right in here. Is that correct, Will?
That's correct.
So the only water that's flowing to this northern basin is from that line in that direction. The balance of the property at the time of development will flow back to the basin at the entrance to the property, which is by and large where the water already flows. I'm not going to say we're not making any changes the way it flows, but by and large there's very little change to the way the water leaves water leaves the property currently and the way it will leave after we've developed the property.
Okay, thank you. I understand all that. My question is just one of clarity. When they said there's a possible or a proposed one, it's not proposed on this plan. Were you're referring to the one that will take care of the road? Is that
Correct. That's
Okay.
being handled by the Jones.
Yeah, great. And my second question is, do you have a timeline as to if construction is to begin, or if the zoning and then the plan we're going, do you have a timeline of beginning and ending of this project?
Stephen?
The actual construction process from A to Z would be approximately 30 months.
30 months. Okay, thank you. That answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any additional questions? Mr. Finney?
I'm going back to the question for Ms. Zimmerman, I guess. In the traffic study, you've stated they're saying there's been no increase in traffic on Highway 329 since the study in 2003.
Yes.
I live on 329. I have lived on 329 since
Mr.
1954.
Finney, be careful about testifying.
I understand.
Okay.
So, are you aware of two subdivisions being built on 1694, between 1694 and Harrods Creek?
Yes.
Are you aware of
Before we go into this, let me say that the Transportation Cabinet has not counted that location since 2012. So it's an estimate. The 2018 volume is based on a count that was made in 2012 and verified by the count that we made.
Okay.
So it's a, you know, it's a physical count being made. It doesn't matter the awareness of the additional subdivisions going in. If they're driving on this section of 329, they were counted.
Can I jump in here and say that's what needs to be understood by everybody? They actually did a traffic count for this project.
Correct.
You did.
We counted.
And what was the date of that traffic count?
April the 17th of this year,
Okay,
2018.
so there's a current traffic count. So going back to 2003, you know, that's just verifying the numbers. What I think really matters is what was the count today? So it does take into account any increase in traffic on the roadway.
But it was stated there since 2003, there's no increase in traffic, and I mean, that cannot be true.
Well,
That is what the data shows. You can say that you don't believe that it's true, and that's fine. The data and the estimate shows that that is the case.
I'm not positive about this, but I think Kenwood Station was built, Apple Patch was built and completed, St. Mary Academy on the other end of 1694 is built, and all these have increased traffic in this area because of people going back and forth to and from those
Be
places.
careful about testifying, because that falls into testifying.
I don't see how the statement, traffic has not increased, can be valid.
Okay, but the end result of all of that analysis is that no turn lanes are required at the entrance at this time, based on a count that was made in April of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Right. Any additional questions? Any additional questions? Mr. McWilliams?
Well, Mr. Chairman, several. I am sorry, but I did not write down the name of the person that talked about the entrance into this potential development and where it is located is a blind spot. Okay. Ms. Zimmerman, is that a blind spot?
At the crest of the hill would be the ideal location to put a entrance because you can see over the crest to both sides. It's also on the outside of the curve, the horizontal curve, indicating that you can see around the curve better than you could if you were on the inside of the curve. Mr. Berry and Mr. Jones have met with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and they have agreed that this is the ideal location for the entrance for this property, and it has already been reviewed and accepted by the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Now, Bill has actually done the layout of the entrance, and if you have specific questions about the layout of the entrance, he'd be happy to address them.
So I guess the answer to my question is no.
In my professional opinion, no.
Thank you.
Answer your question, sir? You have anything else?
Yes, sir.
You have anything else?
I do.
Okay. Proceed.
Mr. Clubb, we'll start with you, and you can defer if you're not comfortable with this, but thinking in terms of number of residences, apartments, or number of buildings, or however you choose to do that, what would be the difference between developing this property as R2 versus R4? You understand my question?
Not really. You're talking about the maximum number of units?
Yeah.
I don't have that table in front of me. It's a calculation that could be performed.
Does anybody on your team have that information?
Are you talking about just the 14 acres, or are you talking about the entire site?
I'm talking about what is proposed to be developed. The 14 acres, yes.
Mr. Urban, can you?
I mean, right now
can you
we've
help
got
me with the permitted density on R2?
3.6.
It'd be 50.82 as an R2. We're proposing 216.
Say again?
50.82, 50.
0.82 units?
Yes.
Okay.
For single family.
Apartment units?
No, for single family.
Single-family units,
We
that's
can't
right, because you
build
can't do that
apartment
on
units
R2.
In an R2, that's why we're here.
Okay, so it would have to be, if it is R2, you could do single-family units,
Correct.
but R4 would allow you to do what you're proposing.
Correct.
Okay. What's the reason increasing, or is there a reason that you want to talk about, increasing the number of units from 196 to 216.
The previous site was only 11 acres. That was the entire site that the Kokentide family owned. There was no more room there because of topography. We couldn't get any more units there. If Stephen wanted to talk about it, their typical build-out, he and Mr. Hawk's typical build-out is 216 units. The previous property just didn't allow us to do that because of its physical size. In this situation, obviously, the Jones family had several acres there. We were able to buy a sufficient amount of land to get the project we like to build.
So simply because you had more acreage, you could have more units.
Correct.
Excuse me, I'm Stephen Edwards. That is not entirely the whole story. So we have had market surveys done by Marcus Millichap, a biggest multi-housing real estate firm in the United States. And there is a desperate need for quality housing in Oldham County. In addition, the Chamber of Commerce of Oldham County has expressed that as well. So it was an opportunity to maximize for that as well, that there is a desperate need for quality housing in Oldham County.
So based on what you perceive or whomever perceives as a need, you increase the number of units.
Yes, we could have, I suppose, had gone with 11 acres or so in that area, but it was an opportunity to meet that need.
Okay, thank you. What sort of ingress and egress agreement is there going to be in place with the Jones Group from the highway to the property that's proposed to be developed?
My understanding is the road that's going to be built from 329 back to this property will be a road built to county standards, will be dedicated, I guess, to city standards, will be dedicated to the city of Crestwood once it meets all the inspections and the city's engineer approves that.
It will be a City of Crestwood road.
Correct.
Once it's built to
Correct.
standard.
County standards, yes, sir.
No elevators.
No, no, sir.
Those poor movers, they got to go to the third floor.
But I would remind again, I think Josh mentioned this, the entire first floor is handicap accessible. Of all the buildings.
Those of you that are laughing aren't old like me. The dog park.
Yes, sir.
Who's responsible for maintaining and cleaning up that dog park?
Stephen, come on.
Good luck.
Josh is responsible for cleaning our dog.
I'm just in sales.
Better raise your fee, my friend.
So we're self-managed. We have property managers that live on the property. We have maintenance that actually lives on the property. It's part of the package. They live there. So our maintenance staff on site on the property is responsible for the all upkeep to the grounds. Obviously, we might outsource lawn care and that type of things, but we have full-time maintenance on the property.
There was a lot of several people commented on down the road the property changing hands. Would you like to address that concern? Would you be willing to address that concern?
Yeah, sure. Doug and I are part of numerous properties throughout Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, Central Kentucky. Over the years, there's been a handful that have changed hands. Oldham Oaks was sold a couple years ago. I get that brought up to me very frequently. That was my partner was going through some estate planning, and that was kind of a one-off, a fluke thing that happened. But this is a property that we would, family owned and maintained and managed by Doug and I and our staff.
Stephen, can you also tell them how many units currently you and Doug manage?
We're currently part of roughly 1,000 units right now that we manage and are part of.
Had one more question, but I'm having a senior citizen moment, Bob.
We can come back.
I'll defer. I'll come back to it. I think it was important.
Okay, all right. All right, any further questions? Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Smith?
There's just one entrance into this, and I would think that would be a problem with fire insurance. Is there going to be a stub road to get somewhere else?
Currently, there is not one proposed, and I don't believe if you were to look at the entrance on 329, I don't believe that there's sufficient road or site distance to put another entrance on the property as it's currently configured.
Okay.
And I would also mention that the fire department was notified, the technical review committee, they were here, there were no comments regarding any issues they had with fire suppression.
Got that. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, okay.
Just to add to that, the buildings are totally sprinkled, and obviously there's fire hydrant facilities throughout, but they are totally sprinkled all 3 floors.
Okay. Mr. Horton?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Regarding school buses and larger trucks and garbage trucks and so forth, I can't see them from here, and I don't have my plans in front of me, but what is the radius of the sort of a cul-de-sac there? What is the radius of that? Is it sufficient for school buses, for any other major kind of truck traffic?
You want to answer?
So, let me address it. Oldham County typically for a 24-foot wide road requires a 70-foot radius on the cul-de-sac, so that would be in place for that, exactly as requirements, 70 feet.
So there will be
which would allow school bus, semi-trucks, FedEx delivery truck, UPS truck, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Finney?
Is a question for Mr. Williams in order here?
Sure.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
County is going through redistricting now, the schools.
We affectionately refer to it as rebalancing, but yes.
Rebalancing, okay, my bad. When the rebalancing is complete, do you have an estimation of what the capacity of Kenwood Station would be at that time?
At this point, no, we are only, so that you all understand, in the rebalancing process, we had an initial community meeting at each of the high schools. Right after school got out, we had what we called the first draft plans. After school starts, the week after school starts, and yes, I'm already kicking myself because it's the week after school starts and I'm going to have these plans ready. I'll have second draft. I'll have a little better number of where I think people are going, but not until October, when the board, when it's presented the last time for public comment, will we know this is what's going to be proposed to the board. So at that point, even in the 1st of August, the middle of August to end of August, I won't have a solid figure on what each of the schools is going to look like. I do know that there will be movement from Kenwood to potentially allow for future growth. Whether that goes to Crestwood, whether that goes to Camden, that I don't know yet.
Okay.
Does that answer the question
I was afraid that was what the answer was going to be, just because I know these things take a lot of time. But, yeah, thank you for your information.
You're welcome.
All right. Any additional questions? Anyone else?
I remember mine.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I remembered it, and Mary Ann said something to me, and I forgot it, and then I had to go right back again.
All right. Go ahead.
An engineer, I don't care. That's not you, Mr. Clark.
What's the question? I'll pick if that's okay.
I don't care. Based on your experience, and we're talking about infrastructure development, as an example, let's use roads, public roads. In your experience, does infrastructure improvements normally precede or follow development? You understand my question, do you?
I understand the question.
This is
It's kind
two in a
of
row.
a chicken and an egg question, I think.
Well, you sit down and you're planning and you're saying, okay, this area, whatever that would be or look like, is going to be developed. And somebody's saying it's going to be developed this way because we have a comprehensive plan, and because it's going to be developed this way, at some point in time in the future, there is going to need to be turn lanes, a widened road, an additional road, a bypass, whatever it may be. And you look at that and you say, okay, well, that may be. Well, the folks in Frankfurt that approve the roads, do they normally react to a plan Or do they react to, are they more like in the crisis mode, where we have traffic that's backed up to Kingdom Come and people can't get on or off or into or out of? Now, you understand my question?
I don't have an answer for you as to what the triggering event is that causes new roads and new interstate exchanges and bypasses and those type things to be built. I don't have an answer for that. But there are a couple things that I made notes about during the opposition's questions that I think need to be part of the record here. First of all, you may or may not know, but the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet actually did a speed study on this portion of the roadway. After we submitted our application, it was done at the time of the TRC meeting, but the results weren't back. They have come back since then, and I think planning staff can verify that this stretch of Highway 329, the speed limit will be lowered from 55 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour. That's the first thing.
Is that a done deal?
Is that a done deal? That's our understanding. Jim? Mr. Urban, excuse me.
We've been notified that after the study, that they will reduce the speed. The done deal is actually changing the speed limit signs. That's not been done yet. So is it a done deal? Not till the signs go up.
Thank you.
But that's in progress.
But that's in progress.
The second thing that we've been made aware of, and I hope it's as no surprise and welcome by everybody in this room, is that the budget that was just passed includes funding for improvements to I-71 to the 14. When that happens, I can't tell you. I haven't read the budget, but that's what we've been told. And I think everybody in this room would agree that that is a much-needed improvement. I don't think that the Jones property in particular, and certainly this apartment complex, is the reason that got done. It needed to be done anyway. As far as future development, as far as turn lanes and those things are concerned, I'm hearing a lot of doubt, I guess you would say, with the traffic study. I mean, we didn't make these numbers up. The 2003 numbers came from the state. The 2012 numbers, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, came from the state. Dan went out on April 17th of this year, put out her own traffic counting device. It came up with its own number. The numbers are what they are. If you don't agree with them, I don't know what to say. I mean, they just are what they are. We didn't make those up. As far as this project, as we're proposing today, is concerned, there are no improvements to Highway 329 that are recommended by Ms. Zimmerman's study. Ms. Wall, who is still here, can speak for herself, obviously, but she reviewed that traffic study and she came to the same conclusion that Ms. Zimmerman did, that any improvements to Highway 329 are not needed at this time, based on this 216-unit proposed apartment building. What I'll say about the balance of the property, and I'm going to go into a little bit of what the opposition question was, there was a hotel that was proposed. We were asked to put in our traffic study to consider some future development on this property. We just guessed and put a hotel in there. We don't have any plans. There's not a contractor. There's not somebody looking at the property. There's not a golden shovel ready to do a groundbreaking. We don't have any plans to build a hotel on this property at this time. But it's probably no secret to anybody in this room either that this property is at the first exit outside of Jefferson County, really the first exit past Zorn Avenue outside. If you take out the Gene Snyder Freeway, it's at an interstate quadrant. There is undoubtedly, it's already Zone C4 on the front of this property, there is undoubtedly commercial potential of this property at some point in the future. The Jones family is here. They can speak for themselves. They have no contracts, no current plans to develop any of that. But I'll tell you, if they do develop that, only the front portion of that property is C4. There's a expansive land between this property and the C4 on the front that is still zoned R2. If there is ever a proposal to rezone that and use that for a commercial or more intensive use, that will by necessity require another application of this body. It will by necessity trigger another traffic study. And I don't think we're under any illusions that at some point we're going to tip the scale and there will be some improvements required to Highway 329 the Jones family will consider and agree to make at that time if that need arises. I hope I answered your question.
As good as it's going to get.
Anything else, sir?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Any further questions at this point for the applicant or the folks that have testified?
Mr. Jeffries, will our questions be answered?
I'm sorry.
Our questions will be
Yes.
answered?
Yes, they can. Yeah. There'll be an opportunity.
Next portion.
Yep. Any further questions from the commissioners? Mr. Klingenfuse.
I couldn't hear quite all the questions before. There was some reference to a dairy farm, and I'm not sure what that was.
Well, the one lady Well, you can speak for yourself if you want to. Come back up.
Was the implication that you had spoke with somebody?
Say that again? I'm sorry.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I grew up next to a dairy farm, and
But not there.
Not there.
Right.
But it's just kind of ironic for me that I'm kind of coming full circle, that at 8 years old, I fought apartments development on a dairy farm.
Okay.
It ended up becoming houses. They didn't pass the apartments. And one of the people up there actually told me, young lady, we ought to elect you to Congress. So here I am, running for magistrate.
Thank you.
But it's about the, rural look of the area and whether something like this, all the other things, but does it fit? Development, yes, there's going to be development, but what kind of development?
I just wanted to clear up that you hadn't spoken. Thank you.
All right, commissioners, let me get
Mr.
your
Chairman.
thought. I'm sorry.
Would you indulge me one more question?
Sure.
Several folks speaking in opposition brought up the issue of signage for this property. And could you address that or have somebody on your team address that, please?
The Jones family has been pretty clear that they want to control this property. Obviously, we talked about design characteristics of the building. Signage is a big part of that, so I'm going to let Gant tell you what they have in mind.
I anticipate that the signage, there may be a sign put out on 329, but it would be of temporary nature. In time, it would probably go away. We would probably limit their signage back to their property at some point.
I'm assuming, Mr. Chairman, that signage would need to come before us.
Well,
Right.
the staff.
Sir?
The staff.
Right. Signs are typically permitted on a staff level
yes.
unless they
Yes.
need a program for signs, and typically
it-
an
yeah.
apartment development does not need a
So
program for
whatever
signs.
signage they want will need to appear before staff and be approved by staff.
Correct. It has to meet the county standards.
Yes, sir.
And theoretically, if there's a sign at 329, that's an off-premise sign, and it would need to go to the, no? Well, it's not on the property of the apartments.
Better, well,
You know.
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Who would approve
people go
that?
back to, the staff will be the ones that make sure that it complies with our county standards.
We can regulate location and size,
Yes,
not content.
yes.
Not content. So if it is not on the property, then it is an off-premise sign.
But that's considered content, that's what this.
Okay, we'll deal with it.
That's a bigger subject, but,
I won't go there then.
okay. Is that all, Mr. McWilliams?
I hope so.
Okay, all right. Didn't see any more questions. I'll tell you what I think we'll do. It's coming up on 12 o'clock here. I don't think it's going to be probably at least another hour, maybe hour and a half. I think we'll go ahead and break for lunch and then come back and try to finish up these two dockets, because I want, everybody to have an opportunity to get their questions answered and that kind of thing. And I don't want folks to feel like they're.
Mr. Williams has another meeting, so I'm not sure if you're going to have other questions for him.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
All
don't know
right.
if you want to delay or ask what the purview of the board is.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, there was one question, if I'm out of order, tell me to sit down. There was one question about our agreement with the school. If you would like me to address that very briefly, it
Okay.
would be very brief.
That'd be fine. Let's do that, and then if there's any other questions relating to the school capacity before he leaves, then we'll try to get those answered. So go ahead.
Mr. Kyler asked about the agreement with the school, and he said there was no agreement. Here's our agreement. Mr. Williams can correct me if I'm wrong. The school proposed, we were told, would require an additional 10,500 gallons per day at the Apple Patch pump station. That's a deal we worked out with the school system on the previous application before this body. We are still committed to do that. 10,500 gallons per day will, I believe, require an upgrade to that system. My clients are willing to do that. They've agreed to do that with the school. You can make it a binding element. We're going to do it. Whenever the school tells us it needs to be done, it'll be done.
Okay.
And I will also, Mr. Kibler stated that it was approved at a special called board meeting after the TRC. That is actually not correct. It was on the agenda, or proposed to be on the agenda for our April meeting, but the superintendent's assistant was out having surgery, and so it was omitted from our agenda at that point. And so the next available meeting was the special called meeting to get it approved.
Okay.
So that's just a clarity. It was actually slated for the April standard board meeting.
Okay. All right, and before we break for lunch, is there any other questions for Mr. Williams that you all have before we let him go for his next meeting at 1 o'clock? Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Is there any, I was going to say, is there any questions that you all have just quickly for Mr. Williams that just strictly to him?
I'd like to know what the next school.
Well, need you get to come back up here.
When is the next school meeting?
Well, come back.
You need
We
to
can't
come-
get.
yeah, so we can get it on the microphone.
When is the next school meeting? Where they'll be talking about the schools and
What do you
a
mean the next
possible
school
ground.
meeting?
You said that it was tabled because it was a surgery. When's the next one?
Oh, no. The approval of the capacity letter was approved at a special called board meeting. It was,
Okay.
it was on the agenda, or supposed to be on the agenda for the April meeting, which would have been our standard
Okay.
meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kybler?
Yeah, just, Gary Kybler. Just a point of clarification, because I think in previous discussion with Mr. Williams and maybe another one of our group, you won't know, I think you said till 2 to 3 years after the rebalancing is completed until you would even need another school of any kind, is that correct?
All right. So after the rebalancing, the hope is that we are getting at least 6 years out of this, which means I will retire and we'll never have to do another redistricting. Because
So will
I
I.
figured it out, this is my 8th redistricting. I've been in the district 21 years. I have, in the last 30 years, and Mr. McWilliams can vouch for this, 30 years ago, the start of this school year, Camden Station opened. The next year, South High opened. I won't go into the whole rigmarole since then, but you know what else we've added since that point in time. The hope is that we get at least 6 years when we rebalance the elementary schools, plus the additions that are coming to schools. The addition to Camden, the addition to South High, which will start next year, but it will take us approximately 3 years to finish. That we will get at least 6 years out of this rebalancing. Now, that's also not accounting for if we see monumental growth in the county, that may change that. But when we get to that point, the decision will be made where the next school has to go as we see the growth in the county. Okay, it takes us basically 3 years designed to putting a school in the ground. So, and the state also does not let us build on future capacity. We have to build on what we have enrolled at that point. So we're going to have to see the schools increase in capacity before we can go to the state and say, we're ready to build the next school. So the hope is that we get at least 6 years.
And while you're up here, and the fact is that the growth, at least at this point in time, I believe that we've seen is in northern part of Oldham County, east of LaGrange. So it very well may be in 6 years. That's 6 years from the end of
The 6
20?
years from the 1920 school year.
So that's 26. Okay, then we may need a school somewhere in the county, but it very well may not be a Brownsboro school, which I know would be disappointing to some. But so therefore, I guess in that, my
Careful,
question is,
make sure
why
it's
are we mitigating a school capacity issue based on a non-issue? Because we're going to have capacity at Kenwood, additional capacity possibly, plus we're not going to know anything about where we might need a school, much less an elementary
That's
school.
testimony, so let's,
Okay.
all right.
I hate to beat a dead horse, but
All right. Thank you, sir.
it needs to be beat.
Commissioners, let me ask you, I made the decision, about the taking a break for lunch. Do you all want a lunch break, or do you all want to continue on and take a few minute recess? I mean, what's your all's thoughts on the hearing?
I would prefer a short break and continue on, Mr. Chairman. I'm not very hungry.
Okay, I see a lot of, okay, let's take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll come back and conclude the two dockets. Democratic process.